For some context for our readings today, so we have here a very familiar scene to us at Christmas. A scene of a place where animals could stay, a starry night overhead. It looks familiar. Baby Jesus in the manger. On Christmas Eve, our nativity here at St James, if you were here on Christmas Eve, looked a bit different. At our Christmas Eve service, some surprising objects appeared in our scene. Many of you were here to experience a wonderful presentation scripted by Lucy Valentine based on a book called There's a Lion in My Nativity. Well, on this next slide, you can see the different symbols that appeared here on Christmas Eve. There was a smartphone because Jesus helps us see God and connect with God. A nurse and a mop because Jesus is our healer and cleans away our sin. There was a lion and a waiter showing Jesus is a powerful king who also came to serve. There was a lifeboat for Jesus, our rescuer. And there were gifts because Jesus is the best gift of all. But there's one more symbol in this picture that I haven't mentioned yet. A tent. Today in our readings, we are diving deeply into the symbolism of a tent. You see, Jesus came to live with us. The Bible imagery speaks of pitching a tent as a place to dwell in or to live, to make a home in the place where the person has pitched the tent. Well, in our Old Testament reading, God promises Israel that if they are faithful to the covenant, He will live among them. God gave them instructions for how to build this special tent for their worship. It was called a tabernacle. For hundreds of years before a temple was built, this special tent called the tabernacle is where the altar was. It's where Israel worshipped. It's where they did their sacrifices. And God promises them that if they respect the tabernacle, then God will live with them and walk with them. That's our Old Testament reading. And then in our New Testament reading, we're going to hear how Jesus fulfills that promise in an even greater way. Jesus wasn't bound by a physical tent, but Jesus came as God in human flesh. God making His home with us and not constrained to the sight of a tent. So as we have our readings this morning, and Lydia and Lucina can come up to read them for us, as we have our readings, be listening for this imagery of God dwelling with us, God living with us, God making His home with us, so that we can be His people and know Him. Thank you to Lucina and Lydia.
This reading is from Leviticus chapter 26, starting at verse 1. Do not make statues of gods for yourselves. Do not set up a likeness of a god or a sacred stone for yourselves. Do not place a carved stone in your land and bow down in front of it. I am the Lord your God. You must always keep my Sabbath days and respect for my sacred tent. I am the Lord. Follow my rules. Be careful to obey my commands.
Moving to verse 19. I will bless you. I will give you many children so that there will be many of you. And I will be faithful to the covenant as I made with you. You will still be eating last year's crops when you will have to make room for new crops. I will live among you. I will not turn away from you. I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of Egypt. I do not want you to be slaves in Egypt anymore. I threw off your heavy load. I helped you walk with your heads held high.
This is the word of the Lord. This reading is from John chapter 1, starting at verse 1. In the beginning, the Word was already there. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through Him. Nothing that has been made was made without Him. Life was in Him, and that life was the light for all people. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome the light.
There was a man sent from God. His name was John. He came to be a witness about that light. He was a witness so that all people might believe. John himself was not the light. He only came as a witness to the light.
The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. The Word was in the world, and the world was made through him. But the world did not recognize him. He came to what was on his own, but his own people did not accept him. Some people did accept him and did believe in his name. He gave them the right to become children of God.
To be a child of God has nothing to do with human parents. Children of God are not born because of human choice, or because a husband wants them to be born. They are born because of what God does.
The Word became a human being. He made his home with us. We have seen his glory. It is the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, and the Word was full of grace and truth.
John was a witness about the Word. John cried out and said, "This is the one I was talking about." I said, "He who comes after me is more important than I am. He is more important because he existed before I was born."
God is full of grace. From him we have all received grace in place of the grace already given. In the past, God gave us grace through the law of Moses. Now, grace and truth come to us through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only is God and is at the Father's side. The one at the Father's side has shown us what God is like. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, there's one thing that I think all of us in Darwin are familiar with. It's the experience of being separated physically from people who we love. We talk on the phone, we keep up with their news, we FaceTime with each of us having a cuppa in our hand, we know their voice, we have their photo on the wall or on our phone. We know a lot of their news, but there's distance. Well, on the next slide, we see the wonderful day when we're together again in person. It's even better if you're living in the same house for a while. Maybe you're staying with them or they're staying with you, or you meet up at a holiday place together and you're sharing a cuppa in the same room. You're cooking a meal together, talking and sharing in unhurried ways. You already loved them and already knew them, but there's an extra closeness, a deeper understanding of where they're at in life, more sense of what's going on in them. Doing life together is special and different, and no amount of technological connection is quite the same. Unfortunately, there's another kind of separation that many of us will sadly know. Well, on this next slide, we see the separation that comes from conflict. Someone who you care about, but the parting wasn't due to outside circumstances. It's not a separation because they had to move house or you had to move to a new place. It's a separation primarily because of conflict. There's been hurt, misunderstanding, anger. Whether you believe they were wrong or you were wrong, or whether you believe both of you could have handled it better, there's pain that lingers when there's broken relationship. Well, on the next slide, we'll see that both of these illustrations have some overlap to the relationship between God and us. From Leviticus, I will live among you. I will not turn away from you. I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. And from John, in the past, God gave us grace through the law of Moses. Now, grace and truth come to us through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only is God and is at the Father's side. The one at the Father's side has shown us what God is like. Well, let's turn first to the Old Testament and to our reading from Leviticus. To put ourselves in the picture, we're going to start with our big Bible overview. God's people, the family of Abraham, first went into Egypt to escape a famine. There was no rain in their land, there was no food, but there was food in Egypt. So they went there. But during the years in Egypt, they became slaves. They grew into a large nation, but they were not free. They cried out to God to save them. And God raised up a leader called Moses. Moses led them on the great exodus. He led them on God's instructions out of Egypt, through the Red Sea, and into the desert wilderness. For 40 years they lived in that wilderness. Through Moses, God formed them into a nation with clear leaders and laws. God taught them how to worship Him, how to follow Him. And when they were ready, they would be taken back to the promised land. Now, our reading from Leviticus comes in the time of the giving of the law, the time when they were in the wilderness, they were living in tents, and they worshipped God at that great tabernacle tent, which was always set up in the centre of everywhere they camped. You can see that tabernacle again. Through Moses, we heard God give them instructions about not making any idols, not worshipping any idols, not bowing down to anything else. We heard God say they have to keep the Sabbath day, the seventh day, holy. In verse 2, God said they must respect the sacred tent. This tent was a visible sign of God's presence with them. The tent was the place where they could make sacrifices and worship. The closer they were to the physical tent, the physical tabernacle, the closer they were to God. But only the priests could enter the tabernacle. Everyone else had to stay outside. Only the high priest could go to the most holy place inside the tabernacle. They could be close to God. God was dwelling with them. But there was a separation too. There was a distance. In verses 9 to 13 of Leviticus, God explains the blessings of staying faithful to Him. If they stay faithful, there'll be a large nation with many generations that keep on coming. There'll be all the things they need, like plenty of food. But the most special parts of the promises of God in that Leviticus passage are about God's presence. I will live among you. I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. This kind of idea comes up throughout the Old Testament. It's a similar idea to Psalm 23 that we heard in our verse of the day. That God is our good shepherd, providing food, water, shelter, safety. But best of all, the good shepherd brings us comfort and peace. He's present with us. The very last line of that psalm is the promise, I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Now, when Israel lived in Egypt as slaves, they were full of shame. And God says His presence with them will take away all shame. Verse 18 says, I did not want you to be slaves in Egypt anymore. I threw off your heavy load. I helped you walk with your head held high. That means taking away the shame so you can stand tall and free. These are amazing promises of God's presence with Israel. They're great promises, but the scope is still limited. For example, their ongoing good relationship with God required constant sacrifices. Sacrifices could only be offered on the one and only altar at the one and only tabernacle. They were not allowed to make many tabernacles through the land. There could be only one. And later, the one temple in Jerusalem. Closeness to God was tied to being in a particular place on earth. Closeness to God was limited to the Jewish people and to those who became Jewish culturally and agreed to follow every Jewish law and custom. The very closest relationship with God was only for priests and prophets. God was with them, but in a limited way. And then the Israelites broke the covenant anyway. They didn't break it once, they didn't break it twice. They broke it again and again and again, ongoing for long periods of time. It's like they took the relationship God offered, and as we see on the next slide, They took that relationship and smashed it. Most of Israel treated their relationship with God like this. God promised the relationship, and they rejected it. Even for those few people who stayed faithful to God, they had still experienced the damage of this broken relationship. We can think about the prophet Ezekiel. If we look at our Bible overview, we see Ezekiel lived in the time of the exile. On the next slide. Ezekiel was faithful to God, living in exile. Because the nation as a whole had rejected relationship with God, he was among the people taken away. The temple had been destroyed. The altar had been destroyed. The most holy place was gone. They were physically distant from Jerusalem and they were slaves again in a foreign land. God seemed so far away. But some people like Ezekiel were faithful to God even in that foreign land. It's a bit like the slide of the cups in separate places. Okay? People like Ezekiel knew they could say sorry to God and that God would hear them. They knew that they could pray. They managed to take some copies of the scriptures with them. And some of the faithful Israelites worked hard in exile to collect all their sacred writings, to get copies of the prophecies that had been given, and to put them all together in what's become the Old Testament. That happened during the time in exile. God used the time of separation to teach them and grow them. He used this time to prepare them to return to the land like He promised they would. God didn't plan, though, just to put things back the way they were in the time of Moses. And He wasn't just going to take them back to the time of David. God had a plan that was so much better. God wasn't going to live with us remotely or in a tent that only a priest could enter or in only one location on earth. God was going to be with each and every one of us, truly living in relationship with us if we choose to accept Him. So we turn now to our New Testament reading. It's on page 793 or 1712. Here in John chapter 1, John starts his gospel by explaining to us the significance of Christmas, the significance of Jesus coming. In the beginning, the Word was already there. Jesus has always been here. Whether we accept Him or not, whether we value our relationship with Him or walk away from it, Jesus has always been there. Jesus was part of the very creation of the world. Jesus brings us life and light and says, will you accept it? Verse 10 explains some of the mystery of this dynamic between Jesus and us. Verse 10 says, the Word, Jesus, was in the world. The world was made through Him, but the world did not recognize Him. Jesus has, in a sense, always been here, but we weren't able to connect. We haven't been able to recognize Him. We needed to encounter God in a different way in order to have a perfect relationship. We needed to encounter God in a different way to have a relationship where we do life together in harmony. Well, verse 12 looks like our next slide. Some people did accept Jesus and did believe. Sorry, that was one before. That makes them children of God. Think about how wonderful it can be when an adult child comes home for a visit after a long time away. This is a small picture of the wonderfulness of coming home to God. But in verse 13, John acknowledges his example of coming home has limitations. Some human families have great relationships and coming home is only joyful. Many families have at least some stresses and strains that might come to the surface as well. And some families have terrible dynamics, even abusive ones. John knows his illustration has limits, and so he explains that it's not like children born to human parents. It's not like being children born into a family they had no choice over. It's not like a family that functions with unhealthy power dynamics. We become children of God to a perfectly safe and loving parent in God. We are reborn children of God because of what God does. This is like the ideal of human families, and then adding even more perfection on top of that. It's everything we might long for in a close, happy family connection, even though in this life on earth we may feel we've never fully experienced it. We can experience it in our relationship with God. John tells us in verse 14 how this happens. It happens because the Word, Jesus, became a human being and made his home with us. All through John's Gospel, he makes a lot of references to the Old Testament. Some of them are very clear references, but often they're subtle. You see, in Matthew's Gospel, Matthew often flags it like really obviously. This happened just like the prophet said, so you know, Matthew wants me to think that. John is different. John will often just use imagery from the Old Testament, expecting that his Jewish readers will go, that's like what happened back then. And so when John says Jesus makes his home with us, he's using the same wording in his Greek language that describes pitching a tent to live in. So we'll see that slide now. The Word became a human being. He pitched his tent here to live with us. John wants us to be thinking about that Old Testament tabernacle tent. John wants us to remember what God said to his people long ago. There were beautiful promises about God living with them and about God taking away their shame and God looking after them, and that was good. But now, says John, God is not just restoring what happened under Moses. God's not just taking us back to what was planned under Moses. In verses 16 and 17 we heard, from God we've received grace in place of the grace already given. In the past, God gave us grace through the law of Moses. Now, grace and truth come through Jesus Christ. We don't just know God by being close to a tent that he lives in, a tent that only a priest could go into. This new kind of living with us is better. We all have full access to Jesus. We all can know Jesus just as he knows us in human flesh. As we come to know Jesus, we come face to face with God. And we can have a relationship with God. This tent image reminds us of another important thing. We are still not at the end of the story. One of the important things to remember about the big Bible overview is that we're living in the midst of it. We're living in the time of the Holy Spirit. The story is not over until Jesus returns, until Jesus brings us the revelation of new creation. A tent is not a permanent structure. It's not a permanent home. It's a great place to spend some time. For nomadic people like Abraham in the Old Testament, a tent can be a very good home for a long period of time, but it's not a permanent dwelling place. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, born to Mary, entrusted to Joseph his stepfather. He is God in human flesh in what is essentially a tent among us. Jesus came to prepare us for the final stage, for the everlasting stage. Jesus came to show us God, to show us that there's a way for sin and broken relationships to be restored. And Jesus came to give us a job to do, a job of spreading the good news and helping others to get ready, because there is a permanent home in our future, the city of God. We're going to hear more about that in our Revelation series in term 2. We can know God now, and we can help others to know God now, and we can look with hope to the future. Each of us has a choice today. Jesus holds out the offer of relationship. We can take that offer and smash it. We have free will. He won't stop us doing that. It's terribly sad when people do that, but it is a choice that we can make. It's also a choice we can undo. If you've at some point turned your back on Jesus, his word tells us it's never too late. While breath is in your body, like the criminal who hung next to Jesus, even in our dying breath, we can turn back to him. I don't suggest waiting, because life is so much better when it's lived with Jesus, but it's never too late to turn to him. Perhaps though you're someone who says, I do know Jesus, but it feels more like I'm in Darwin and Jesus is in a far-off place. And our coffee cups are distant, and we connect remotely. Perhaps you read the Bible and it's like reading a letter from a far-off loved one, and you don't feel his presence or sense his voice and guidance. Well, these passages, I hope, will encourage you to continue the journey of spending time with God. Sometimes when we reconnect with someone after a time apart, it's instantly wonderful, and everything is easy and joyful from the first moment. Other times, when we reconnect with someone, it's a bit awkward at first. It takes time to settle into a rhythm. It takes time to find the right ways of communicating and to find what works and clicks for us. Perhaps it works best for you to read your Bible alone in your room. Or perhaps it works better to listen to an audio Bible while sitting on the beach. Or perhaps it works best when you read the Bible with someone else so you can discuss it as you go. Perhaps prayer time works best when you write down your thoughts and questions. Or perhaps you draw or paint your response to God, or sing or dance, or lie in complete stillness. There are lots of ways of enjoying a good relationship, and all of them take intentionality. Over term 1 this year, we're going to be looking more closely at our foundational Bible verses, and we're going to be exploring what they have to say about our identity and our purpose. I'm excited about this journey for us as a church, and our Bible study home groups will start up in term 1 also. If you aren't currently in one, I really encourage you to consider it. These are great spaces for sharing ideas, asking questions, growing in confidence in prayer and the Bible, and doing life together. I also encourage you to be interacting with our foundational Bible verses in your everyday life. Last week, getting ready for Christmas, David was at home sweeping the floors of our house. He was out the other end of the house, and I could hear drifting through the door, always think about what you said. And he said every time, he just kept singing that song. It had done its job of being an earworm, filling his mind with scripture as he swept the floors of the house. These Bible verses give so many great reminders and pointers for life in good relationship with Jesus. We're going to have another prayer retreat at Real on the first weekend of Lent, so the 20th and 21st of February. My prayer is that each person who comes along to the prayer retreat, who sets aside that time to invest in their relationship with God, will be greatly blessed. That they'll experience a deepening of connection and relationship, and that they'll hear clearly from God. Wherever you are in your walk with God, these words are sure. Grace and truth come to us through Jesus Christ. Jesus, who is at the Father's side, has shown us what God is like. And to the people who accept him and believe in his name, he gives the right to be children of God. As the band comes up, we prepare to respond in sung worship. Our first song picks up on many images from John chapter 1, that Jesus existed from the beginning before there was light. Jesus has always been with us. But we now have the joy of being able to behold him, to see him, to know him, to experience him dwelling and living with us. This song also picks up on the Bible phrase Alpha and Omega. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, and Omega is the last letter. So it's like saying Jesus is the A and to the Z. He was there at the beginning. He knows the ending that's yet to come. We're currently living in the middle, and Jesus is here with us. He knows the end and the beginning. And he comes to us as human to guide us safely through. I invite you to stand if you're able as we worship Jesus.